Hello everybody, welcome back to another Roblox studio video. In this video we're featuring the second part to the physics and constraints video. If you haven't seen the first one, that's the one before this, and in that video we went over the first 10 excluding the universal one, so the first 9 in the constraints list, all the way from ball and socket to no collision. We also went over attachment, the general attachment that you apply to parts in that video, so go check that out if you haven't already or if you want to learn about those ones. In this video, we're going to be going over the line orientation all the way down to angular velocity, and you're going to learn all about those. And with these next constraints that I'm going over, these ones that I just listed, these ones are going to consist more of active movement type physics, or to simplify, they seem to cause a lot of movement or force applied to the part. Some tips I'm going to give before the video starts as well is that you should consistently have constraint details on. This is in the constraints menu, list, whatever you want to call it. And this is so you can look at arrows on the constraints and the attachments on the constraints to see the direction of the forces that these constraints are going to be applying to the part. So now that we have that finished, I hope you guys are going to enjoy this and hope you will learn something new. And we're going to get right into it. Now, one more thing before I continue is that we have some new US 11 community merch, or US 11 for the channel, some merch like this, and you can find that in the US 11 community group. You can find that in the description below. Go ahead, join that group. We do a bunch of event stuff now, and you can pick up some things like this. Recently, I've made some shirts for Easter as well, so you can pick up some of those as well. So that's all. Alright, so the first one getting into this is the align orientation constraint. This one will apply torque or movement to a part or two parts, so both attachments made between the two parts align. The parts probably won't end up in the same position all the time, but it will keep it in the same direction or rotation, also known as its orientation. Exploring the properties of it, enabling something like primary axis only, will allow you to change its align type, enabling you to make it parallel to each other or perpendicular. If you choose parallel, the attachment will continue to try being in line with the other and the way it's facing. And if it's perpendicular, it will continue to try to stay opposite to the way the other is facing. There are also some other options like reaction torque enabled, and if you turn this on, both attachments on both parts will become active, each being able to change the orientation of the other part, sort of like reacting or mimicking one another. You can also mess around with its compliance properties, changing how responsive it is to a change in each part's orientation. Following this up is the option rigidity enabled, which will essentially maximize how responsive or active the part is when something is done to it. And that's pretty much it for all the properties you can change with align orientation. The next one is align position, and this one will apply force or movement to a part so both attachments will meet at the same location. This time it will match the position, but it won't have the same direction or rotations like align orientation would. Looking at the properties, we can enable the property apply at center of mass, and this will make it so the force applied to each attachment or part is applied at the center of the object, instead of where the attachment is placed on the part. You can also enable reaction force enabled, which will make it so each part, as long as both are unanchored, will come together and attempt to have both attachments meet at the same location. Once again, there are compliance properties we can edit, and there's also the option of rigidity enabled, which will overrun the compliance properties and maximize responsiveness and activity of the parts. And that's pretty much going to be it for align position. The next one we have is vector force, and this will apply directional force to the part depending on where the attachment is placed on the part. The direction and strength of this can be changed and edited through properties by changing the force XYZ values. And a fun fact, side note, this specifically is done by a vector 3 value, and you'll see that if you program. The force's direction can be changed through changing the relative to property, where the force can be driven through the original attachment you made or another attachment in the world, or the world coordinates themselves. And lastly, there is apply at center of mass, which will make it so the force is applied at the center of the object. Pretty simple, and that's it for vector force. After this is line force, and the difference with line force to vector force is that there's a force applied to the part or object to make it so that the attachment on it exactly follows a line designated by the two attachments you place between two parts or objects. Based on the direction of the line formed by these two attachments, the directions and intensity of the force will change, though it will always attempt to make it from point A to point B. Once again, there are some properties that you can change, including apply at center of mass, which will once again make it so the force applied is at the center of the object or part. You can also see reaction force enabled again, which will make it so both parts and attachments will come together, or try to, as long as both are unanchored. Lastly, there is the magnitude and inverse square law. And with magnitude, you can change the force applied to the object when going to its destination. And similarly, inverse square law changes the magnitude, but it's based on the distance of the parts. And based on those distance of the parts, it will determine the magnitude given to them. The mathematical explanation of this is that the magnitude you input is multiplied by the inverse square of the distance between each attachment. I don't exactly know why in the video I had to set my magnitude so high for the inverse square law to work, but I may have had things backwards, but I'm unsure. Next we have torque, which is fairly simple. This attachment is going to find the center of the mass on the part it's attached to, and then spin the part or object. Of course, there is the option to change the force of the torque for the XYZ values, and this will determine the direction the torque is driven to spin. You can change the relative to property as well, which will determine the point or area the spin will be driven towards. This can be your original attachment, the world coordinates, or another attachment in the world. And that is pretty much it for torque. And finally, the last constraint is angular velocity. This one's going to apply torque or force to a part, so a part moves with a constant angular velocity. The first property you can change of this is the angular velocity of the part or attachment, and this will determine the angular force given to the part and will determine the direction the part will go in based on the x, y, and z values. The one after this option is the max torque property, and this will set a limit on how fast the part can travel when active, basically restricting it to a certain max speed. Lastly, there is the relative to option, once again changing the point at which the part will travel towards. Changing this to attachment 1 will actually give you another property to work with. What you'll see is that this is reaction torque enabled. This being enabled will assume you have two parts and it will be traveling towards that attachment to attempt to come together, similar to what I explained earlier with the other constraints. And that's gonna finish it up for these constraints. Alright guys, so yeah, that's going to do it for this video, the second part of the physics and constraints tutorial videos, and the last part actually. And in this video we went over the align orientation constraint, align position, vector force, line force, torque, and angular velocity. I showed you all the properties of them, how to work with them, and the overall purpose and functionality of each constraint and how they work. I hope you guys learned something new today. I hope you got what you were looking for by watching my video, and if you did, please make sure to like and subscribe, and also share the video. It helps me a bunch. Sharing the video helps me a bunch. If you don't share the video, you're a noob. You're a noob. Sorry, but it's true. Well, that's gonna do it for this video. Is there anything else I need to say? Let's see. Check out the social links below. I'm gonna have more social links down there. There's a US 11 community group. We've got events that are going to be hosted there, and I've also got a Discord that you guys can join if you want to hang out. There's a lot more to come. Just go down in the description, check that out. And that's it. Hope you guys enjoyed. See you later.